It was a crisp Wednesday morning in Washington, the kind that makes the White House lawn look like something out of a dream, perfectly trimmed, flawless under a pale sun. Secret Service agents stood posted, scanning the perimeter like statues with earbuds. The press, on the other hand, stood fidgeting behind the rope line, sipping burnt coffee from paper cups and refreshing their feeds for anything unexpected. They didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:17 a.m., the southern gate opened and a black electric SUV rolled through. It wasn't part of the normal motorcade. The doors opened quietly, and to everyone's surprise, it wasn't a diplomat or cabinet member who stepped out. It was a child. 5-year-old X-A-A-Z Musk, known simply as X, emerged, holding the hand of a tall security escort. He was dressed in a tiny black suit, his hair slightly disheveled, a blue NASA pin on his lapel. The press surged. Elon Musk's son? At the White House? Why? But before they could shout questions, a second figure emerged, and the entire crowd went silent. It was not Elon Musk. It wasn't Grimes. It wasn't anyone from Tesla or SpaceX. It was a man with short silver hair, walking 3 steps behind the boy, his hands clasped behind his back like a former general returning to battle. The cameras zoomed in. The software started tagging faces automatically. One name popped up. Again and again. Douglas Blackthorne. A name buried in classified documents, whispered in defense briefings, and long believed to be off-grid for years. He was Elon Musk's former security chief, fired quietly during the Neuralink blackout. Some said he knew too much. Others said he disappeared after a top-secret Mars initiative was scrubbed from every internal log overnight. And now here he was, at the White House, walking behind Elon Musk's son, calm, silent, and terrifyingly intentional. The moment was caught from 3 angles, and within minutes, it was everywhere. "Who is he?" trended globally in under 11 minutes. "Elon's son at the White House, with him!" screamed tabloid headlines. And inside the West Wing, someone dropped a pen as they watched the footage replay. "What the hell is Musk doing?" a senior advisor whispered. No one answered, because the real question wasn't why the boy was there. It was what he was carrying in that tiny silver case. The West Wing was buzzing. A child showing up at the White House was odd. A child showing up with Douglas Blackthorne was cause for a national security alert. By 9:35 a.m., the president had been briefed, not with words, but with a silent iPad handed to him by his chief of staff. It showed a single still image. Young X standing just past the South Lawn entrance, holding a small, polished silver case, one hand gripping the handle tightly, the other resting by his side. Behind him, Blackthorne looked ahead, like a man who had already calculated every possible outcome. "What's in the case?" the president asked flatly. No one in the room had an answer. In a secured surveillance room 2 floors below, analysts reviewed the moment frame by frame. The case was unmarked, but not ordinary. The build material was reflective, seamless, and clearly custom. Facial recognition. AI confirmed the boy's identity in seconds. The man behind him was harder. Blackthorne's biometric data hadn't appeared in federal databases in 3 years. Not since he was placed on the Watch Without Warrant list after a mysterious breach at Tesla's Nevada facility, an incident never made public, scrubbed even from internal Tesla memos. Only a single code name survived that night in official logs: Project Warden. Back on the lawn, X stood silently as a young female aide approached. She bent down to his level, smiling gently. "Hey there, sweetheart. Can you tell me your name?" X blinked once, then replied calmly, "I'm here to deliver this." He lifted the case with surprising ease and extended it toward her. The aide hesitated, glancing at the Secret Service agent nearby, who gave a subtle nod. She took the case. Immediately, her comms earpiece came alive. "Do not open it there. Take it to secure room 7. Now." Blackthorne hadn't moved. He was still 3 paces behind, hands clasped, expression blank. "Mr. Blackthorne," a senior agent finally said, "we need you to come with us." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here for your building," he said, voice like gravel wrapped in ice. "I'm here for the boy." And then he added, as if rehearsed, "and for the message Elon couldn't say out loud." Secure Room 7 was 3 levels beneath the White House's main floor, off limits even to most staff. Designed during the Cold War, it was used only when the Situation Room wasn't secure enough. And now, it held a silver case brought by Elon Musk's son and escorted by a ghost from the intelligence world. The case was placed on a pressure-stabilized titanium table. A technician ran a non-invasive scan. No explosives, no electronics emitting RF, no biometric locks, just a narrow slot near the handle. A keycard reader. Moments later, a junior aide entered, holding a sealed envelope. On it was a handwritten note. "For the President's eyes only." The keycard was inside. With a subtle click, the case opened. No gas, no flash, just silence. Inside, nestled in molded carbon foam, was a single white cylinder, roughly the size of a thermos. No buttons, no screens. Only a black stripe running around its center and an engraved code on the base. SRX 731, Warden Protocol. Auth, Polaris. The President stood behind the glass, watching the live feed. "What is that?" he asked. The room was silent. Then someone from NSA whispered, "That code prefix. It's from a Mars comm relay." "Mars?" the President snapped. "Musk launched that protocol last year, right? Autonomous rover diagnostics?" But one advisor shook his head. "Not quite. Warden Protocol isn't public. Not even to us. We only know the name exists." "And Polaris?" someone else asked. The Director of National Intelligence answered slowly, "Polaris isn't a location. It's a person, a call sign, one we haven't heard in 4 years." "Who?" A long pause. Then the word came, "Blackthorne." At that moment, in the viewing gallery outside, Blackthorne raised his hand and pointed to the cylinder through the glass. "That's not a weapon," he said. "It's a truth." He turned to the President's aide. "And Elon Musk wants you to hear it, before you try to silence him again." The aide looked rattled. "Silence him for what?" she asked. Blackthorne leaned in just enough to be heard. "For what he found buried under the southern pole of Mars." The phrase, "buried under the southern pole of Mars," hit the room like a detonation. Not the loud kind, more like a sudden vacuum of air. Everyone stared at the cylindrical object in the case, now glowing faintly from a narrow ring around its midsection. President Walton narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me Musk found something on Mars and didn't report it to us?" Blackthorne didn't flinch. "He reported it. Just not to you." A chill ran through the room. The President turned to his Chief of Staff. "Get Elon Musk on a secure call. Now." But before the order could be executed, the screen inside Secure Room 7 flickered to life, on its own. Static gave way to a digital feed. And then Elon Musk's face appeared. Not live, pre-recorded. He wore no suit, no tie, just a plain black shirt, standing in front of a backdrop that was unmistakably not Earth. "Mr. President," he began calmly, "if you're watching this, it means X has delivered the artifact safely." He glanced downward, as if acknowledging the cylinder. "What you're looking at is not man-made. Not by us. Not by any known force in the current solar system's industrial history. It was uncovered 2 kilometers beneath Mars's south polar cap by Starlink rover Unit 3. The structure it was pulled from is massive, geometric, dormant, and broadcasting in a frequency humans were never supposed to intercept. He paused. I tried to go through the proper channels. You blocked them. You labeled my report as disinformation and rerouted it to a subcommittee that doesn't even exist. That's when I realized this wasn't about national security. This was about control. In the room, no one breathed. I didn't send this as a threat. I sent it as proof, Elon continued. We are not alone. And someone, or something, left a message buried where only the reckless or the relentless would ever find it. I was both. He leaned closer to the camera. And if you try to stop the truth from reaching humanity again, I won't be so polite next time. The feed cut. Silence. Then, X, Elon's son, walked toward the case, untouched by the tension in the room. Calm. Still. He placed his hand on the glowing cylinder, and it whispered. A mechanical, melodic pulse filled the room, not loud, but ancient. A rhythm too precise to be natural, too soft to be human. The president stepped back. What the hell did he wake up? Someone whispered. The sound emanating from the cylinder wasn't like anything they had heard before. It didn't echo. It didn't pulse like a machine. It vibrated something internal, like it was resonating not through the room, but through people. President Walton took a step forward, stopping just short of the glowing artifact. His voice dropped. Did that thing just speak? X turned his head slightly, calm as ever. It doesn't speak. It remembers. Director Blackthorne narrowed his eyes. Remembers what? The boy glanced back at the cylinder. That depends on who's listening. The president turned to the chief science advisor. Get it into Containment Protocol 1A immediately. I want AI analysis on the waveform. But the lead technician in the room shook her head. Sir, we've already tried. Our equipment can't map the frequency. It's not analog. It's not digital. It's something else. In the silence that followed, the cylinder shifted, physically moved, only a few millimeters, but enough to cause the room to freeze. No one's touching it? The chief of staff asked, eyes wide. Nothing made contact, another staffer confirmed. Then the room dimmed, just a shade, as if the lights were still on, but the color temperature had dropped. The blues and whites of the security monitors took on a greenish tint. Shadows deepened. Even the air felt heavier. Lights just dropped by 3%, uncommanded, the technician announced, fingers dancing over the control panel. Shut it down, Walton ordered. Everything. Kill the room. Pull the breakers. But the system didn't respond. The mainframe blinked back in red. Access denied. Blackthorne turned to the boy. What is it doing? X looked up. It's scanning. Scanning for what? The boy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back toward the cylinder, calm, measured, as though he'd done it before. The Secret Service agents moved, but President Walton held up a hand. Let him go. X reached the device and whispered, He's gone now. It's just me. Suddenly, the artifact's glow softened, and the room brightened back to normal. The air lightened. The sound, if it could even be called that, ceased. And on the surface of the cylinder, a symbol appeared. Etched not by heat or pressure, but as if it had always been there, waiting to be noticed. An interlocking triangle and spiral, glowing faintly blue. What does that mean? The president asked. X replied, voice distant. It means it's time to choose. The image on the cylinder, the triangle and spiral, began to pulse slowly, as if syncing with the heartbeats in the room. X stepped back, and for a moment, no one moved. Then President Walton signaled for the artifact to be secured, this time with non-electronic containment. No power, no networks. I want this under analog lockdown. Blackthorne turned to the president. Sir, I think we're dealing with something that doesn't obey our definition of tech. This could be biological, or quantum, or both. Walton rubbed his temples. And the boy? What exactly is he? X stood quietly, overhearing but not reacting. Then, as if pulled by some unseen thread, he spoke. You're asking the wrong question. What's the right question? Blackthorne asked. X turned to face them, his tone steady. Why did it follow me? The room fell into a heavy silence. Back at the White House residence later that evening, Elon Musk reviewed the encrypted footage in his private server. The security alert from SpaceX's southern compound had triggered a classified AI anomaly notice, something that usually meant internal sabotage. But what he saw instead stunned him. A digital shadow of the same cylinder X had carried into the White House, captured weeks earlier, materializing on a thermal feed where no object had been recorded. Musk's eyes narrowed. He clicked Enhance and zoomed into the heat signature. It was not just the object. There was a second anomaly beside it. A human-sized blur. No known shape. No ID. He hit pause, backed it up, played it again. The blur never left X's side. Musk's fingers hovered over the comm panel. Connect me to General Reeves. Level Omega clearance. Seconds later, the retired Air Force general appeared on screen, his face pale. You saw it, didn't you? Musk asked. Reeves nodded grimly. We've been tracking similar phenomena for 9 months. They're not visitors. They've always been here. We just didn't have the right lens to see them. Musk leaned forward. And the boy? Reeves swallowed. You told me once he dreamed things before they happened, that his drawings matched orbital paths no child should know. Elon, we believe X may be part of a generational imprint, a signal that returns every few decades. A memory inside DNA, a memory? Musk asked. Of what? Reeves's voice dropped. Of what's coming. Beneath Washington, D.C., hidden under the foundations of the Lincoln Memorial, there exists a rarely acknowledged sublevel known only to a handful of people, the Arcanum Vault. Built during the Cold War as a last resort command center, it now served a different purpose. Housing phenomena that defied scientific understanding. That morning, Elon Musk and President Walton descended together, accompanied by Blackthorne X and a handful of carefully vetted operatives. The silence in the elevator was thick. Even the hum of the descending shaft seemed muted. X stood between the adults, staring at the floor, saying nothing. But his fingers traced a shape on the stainless steel wall. A triangle with a spiral inside. Again. The vault opened with a deep mechanical sigh, revealing a round chamber of lead-lined walls, soft amber lighting, and display cases that looked more like museum exhibits than scientific storage. Inside, objects hummed faintly. Some glowed, others pulsed rhythmically. One hovered silently inside a vacuum chamber. All were unexplained. This is where we keep the things that don't fit, Blackthorne said. UFO fragments, symbols found on asteroids that predate known alphabets, a piece of metal recovered from under the Sphinx that has no terrestrial isotope signature. And now, this. He motioned toward the newly acquired cylinder from X. Musk stared. You think these are connected? President Walton turned to him. I think your son is the connection. Across the room, X wandered to one of the display cases. Inside it was a slab of stone etched with concentric circles. This one, he whispered. It's like the dream. Everyone turned. What dream? Walton asked, his voice cautious. X knelt beside the case, his eyes scanning the grooves. I was in a place with no time. It wasn't dark, but there was no sun, just humming. And then a voice said, "Remember who carries the circle." I woke up crying. Musk moved quickly to his son, kneeling beside him. "You never told me this." X nodded, almost ashamed. "I thought it was just a dream, until I saw the cylinder. It's not new, Dad. It's old. Older than buildings. Older than stars." Blackthorn's breath caught in his throat. That's exactly what the Sumerian records implied. That the symbols weren't invented. They were remembered. President Walton stepped back, visibly shaken. This isn't just a family mystery. This is legacy. Ancient memory. Then, the lights dimmed. A power fluctuation. But the vault was built with 6 redundancies. No explanation. Suddenly, the cylinder began to glow again. Without any connection, it activated, emitting a slow, deep vibration that made the walls themselves seem to breathe. And from inside the case, X was kneeling by. The stone slab pulsed in response. 2 different objects, Blackthorn muttered, from opposite sides of the world, resonating together. Musk looked at Walton. "We're not in control of this anymore." Walton didn't respond. He was staring at X, who had begun to hum quietly. Not in fear. In harmony. The next morning, the White House grounds looked unchanged. Secret Service agents sipped burnt coffee in black SUVs. Tourists took selfies at the gates. But somewhere deep beneath it all, in the substructure few knew existed, Elon Musk was staring at a holographic representation of his son's brain. Projected across a domed briefing room in the West Wing's restricted wing, the real-time neural scan had been initiated after X had collapsed momentarily following the artifact's second resonance. He wasn't injured. He wasn't unconscious. He was somewhere else. Dr. Lila Monroe, a neuroscientist from MIT who had worked with NASA's sleep research team, pointed to the waves. "He's not asleep. He's not awake. He's in a cognitive state we don't have a classification for. It's as if he's processing data from a sensory input that doesn't exist in human experience." Musk stood with his arms crossed. He wasn't a stranger to extraordinary problems, but this was different. This wasn't engineering. This was something older than science. President Walton entered, face drawn, flanked by an advisor from DARPA and another from the Vatican's unofficial scientific observatory. "Elon," Walton said flatly, "we need to talk about Project Perseus." Musk turned. "I thought that was decommissioned in 1997. Walton shook his head. "That's what we told the public. Perseus was our attempt to trace non-linear time loops and dimensional echoes, data threads that seem to loop through history. Signals we thought were background radiation turned out to be patterned, intentional. And you think my son is receiving them? We think he's responding to them." In the next room, X's eyes fluttered open slowly. He was lying on a biomat, heart rate calm, breathing steady. As soon as he sat up, he asked, "Where's the other key?" "What key?" Monroe asked gently. "The one under the ice." Elon burst into the room. "What ice, X?" X tilted his head. "In Greenland, near the impact crater. It's buried with the mirror." Monroe exchanged glances with Walton. "We never told him about Hiawatha." Walton moved toward the glass. "That's a site we've kept black since 2016. Nothing in public data." X stood and walked toward Elon. "You have to go. The mirror's waiting for you, but I can't go with you." Elon's voice cracked. "Why?" "Because I am the signal now. If I leave this ground, the circuit breaks." Blackthorn entered quietly. "He's right." The symbols were never meant to travel together. The vault grounds complete the circuit. You move both pieces. You risk triggering a convergence. Musk stared at the boy. And if I don't go? Then the door never opens, and the memory never comes back. A silence settled over the room. Then, as if from nowhere, X said, "Take the engineer with the steel hand. He knows where to dig." Everyone turned. "How do you know that?" Blackthorne asked. But X didn't answer. He was already humming again, soft, rhythmic, like the cylinder's vibration. Only this time, the room's lights dimmed once more, and this time, the walls themselves began to pulse back. It took less than 24 hours to reroute a private SpaceX reconnaissance flight from Starbase to Greenland. On board, Elon Musk, Agent Blackthorne, 2 cryo-excavation specialists, and a mechanical engineer named Tobias Rylund, the man with the steel hand. Rylund was a veteran of SpaceX's Martian excavation prototypes, known for building machines designed to dig through permafrost and volcanic rock. They landed near the Hiawatha crater under the guise of climate sensor retrieval. The area was remote enough for secrecy, harsh enough to dissuade observers, and sacred enough that rumors of ancient anomalies had never fully gone away. As the rotor blades whined to a stop, Elon stepped off the aircraft into biting wind. The cold clawed at his face, but he barely noticed. All he could think of was X's voice, calm and unshaken. "It's buried with the mirror." The team began the descent with thermal scanners. At a depth of 6.4 meters, Tobias stopped. "There's a void," he said, tapping the scanner. "Not a cave, a chamber, with geometric walls." Blackthorne narrowed his eyes. Unnatural symmetry. Excavation began immediately. Snow and ice gave way to frozen sediment. Then to something harder. Metal, maybe, but not steel. The moment Tobias's drill touched it, the cylinder Musk had brought with him began to glow faintly, reacting to something beneath their feet. "Back off!" Elon shouted. The team withdrew, and Musk approached the opening himself. Slowly, he knelt, placing the cylinder on the ice. The glowing lines on its surface reconfigured, forming a symbol none of them recognized, a circle broken by 2 vertical lines. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Not violently, but as if something ancient had exhaled beneath them. A crack split the ice, revealing a hexagonal hatch, seamless, silent, untouched by time. Tobias stepped forward and touched the edge. "It's not metal. It's something else. It's warm." Blackthorne moved to cover Elon. "We're opening this door. Are you sure we want to?" Musk stared into the blackness. "Number but my son says it's the only way forward." He pressed the cylinder into the hollow of the hatch. There was no dramatic explosion, no jolt of energy, just a quiet, precise unlocking sound, like a library drawer opening after centuries, and the hatch began to descend on its own. A staircase appeared, lit from below by a pale, impossible glow. Elon took a breath, turned to Tobias and Blackthorne, and said, "Whatever's down there isn't ours, but it's been waiting for someone who could hear it." They descended into the earth, unaware that across the world, in the White House, X was now standing in the garden alone. And above him, satellites began rerouting their orbits without command. The descent into the chamber felt like stepping into the lungs of the earth, humid, echoing, alive. The walls were not carved but grown, lined with a shimmering material that responded faintly to movement. Each step down the hexagonal stairwell triggered a pulse in the walls, like the heartbeat of something ancient and waiting. Elon Musk walked ahead, carrying the cylindrical device. Tobias Rylund and Agent Blackthorne followed closely, their boots clinking softly against the glowing surface. They reached the base, where the corridor widened into a circular room. And there, standing in the center, was something no one had prepared for. A massive vertical frame. A kind of mirror, but not made of glass. It was liquid and solid all at once, refracting time itself. The cylinder in Elon's hand began to vibrate, and then detached its own core, sending out 3 filaments of light that latched onto points on the mirror's edge. A voice, clear but originless, spoke. It didn't use language, not really. It used understanding. And what it said, each of them heard differently. Blackthorn heard a warning. Protect the child. He knows too much for too long. Tobias heard a map. The machine inside the boy is not mechanical. It is inheritance. But Elon heard a memory, his son's voice, but older, deeper. You were always meant to find this, Dad, because you're the only one who can decide what happens next. The mirror began to ripple. It wasn't showing reflections. It was showing possibilities. In one ripple, Earth was covered in golden structures that pulsed with light. In another, machines walked empty cities. In another still, a massive ship lifted from the moon's surface and entered a wormhole that collapsed behind it like a sealed scar in space-time. Behind them, the hatch sealed shut. Blackthorn raised his weapon. This feels like a one-way mission. Elon turned to him calmly. It always was. Back in Washington, the president was demanding answers. Satellite data had gone dark over Greenland. White House comms officers were flooded with requests from global leaders, but none of them knew what X knew, that his father was standing inside something that had been dormant for 10,000 years, activated only by one thing, someone who believed in building forward instead of falling backward. Elon stepped toward the mirror. It didn't open. It accepted. And in that moment, every satellite in low Earth orbit blinked, as if nodding in agreement. Across the globe, tech systems flickered for a fraction of a second. Deep under Greenland, a pulse of information, code, math, memory, poured into Elon's device. The room dimmed, then went completely black. When they woke, they were back at the surface. No hatch, no chamber, just ice. And in Elon's hand was the cylinder, now cool, and a voice in his head whispering just one thing. He is ready. And just like that, Elon Musk disappeared from the headlines, but not from history. What he saw beneath the ice, what he touched, and what his son was born into, wasn't a secret anymore. It was a signal, a warning, a beginning. They thought they were watching a billionaire. They were actually watching a bridge between 2 timelines. And in the silence that followed, the world had only one question left.